What would you do if the life you meticulously built for the people you love vanished overnight, leaving you with nothing but a mountain of debt and a choice between your dignity and your survival? When the illusions of success strip away, the true weight of a man is measured not by the height of his throne, but by his willingness to sink his bare hands into the dirt to protect the people who call him a protector. In the high-stakes world of corporate ambition, success is a fragile glass tower. But when that tower shatters, the shards cut deepest into the ones who never asked for luxury in the first place, the mothers who sacrificed their youth and the partners who loved them before the wealth arrived. This is the untold story of a devastating downfall, a hidden sacrifice, and the ultimate test of an unconditional love that refuses to break under the crushing weight of financial ruin. The midday sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty gravel road leading to the rural marketplace, its heat radiating off the ground in wavy, distorting sheets. Tu Tien wiped the stinging sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist, her hands stained green from hours of harvesting in the overgrown garden. For months, the vast farm had been silent, a stark contrast to the bustling corporate offices her partner Jack used to command. She looked down at her wicker baskets, overflowing with plump green loofahs and heavy, dust-coated winter melons. They were growing faster than she could track, overtaking the untamed corners of the property where the grapefruit trees stood neglected, their branches weeping under the weight of unpruned foliage. "Just a little more effort," she whispered to herself, her voice a fragile anchor against the rising tide of panic in her chest. "By the end of the year, if I tend to these roots, they will provide. They have to." She set up her modest stall on the edge of the crowded village market, smoothing down a few large, damp banana leaves to protect the freshly picked produce from the rough wooden planks. The market was a chaotic symphony of bartering voices, clattering metal pans, and the thick, heavy scent of raw earth and livestock. To the passing strangers, she was just another vendor trying to make a meager living. No one here knew her as the elegant woman who once stood beside a high-powered CEO. No one knew that the pennies she was collecting today were meant to keep a roof over their heads. "Sister, please come and look. Buy some fresh loofahs and winter melons today," Tu Tien called out, her voice straining against the competitive roar of the marketplace. She forced a bright, welcoming smile onto her sun-baked face as an elderly woman paused in front of her stall. "They were harvested just this morning. Very sweet, very clean." The older woman looked down, poking at a long loofah with a critical, calloused finger. "How much for a kilogram of these loofahs, girl?" "They are only 25,000 VND per kilogram, ma'am. Look how green they are. Perfect for a cooling summer soup." The woman shook her head, turning away. "Too expensive. I already bought some down the road." Tu Tien's heart sank, a small bead of cold sweat tracing down her spine. "Please, ma'am, take another look. I can give you a good price if you take more." But the woman was already swallowed by the crowd. Refusing to let despair freeze her into inaction, Tu Tien turned to the next passerby, a middle-aged woman carrying an empty woven bag. "Ma'am, please support me today. Fresh winter melons and crisp loofahs. Only 25,000 VND for the loofahs, and the green winter melons are just 12,000 VND a kilogram. How much can I get for you?" The buyer paused, squinting at the large winter melons. "The winter melons look good. If I take a large amount, will you give me a discount? Don't be rigid with the price, and I'll take a big one off your hands." "Yes, of course. If you take a large one, I will absolutely lower the price for you," Tu Tien replied quickly, her hands trembling slightly with relief. She pointed to a massive, perfectly formed winter melon resting at the back. "What about this one, ma'am? Let's see the weight first. Do you have a scale?" Tu Tien looked around frantically, realizing her own scale was still packed away at the far end of the property. "Please wait just one moment. Let me borrow a scale from the neighboring stall." She rushed over to a nearby vendor, offering a polite bow. "Sister, may I borrow your scale for just a quick minute?" "I have a customer waiting." "Go ahead, use it quickly," the vendor replied, waving her hand carelessly. Tu Tien carried the heavy metal scale back, carefully balancing the large winter melon onto the platform. "Look here, ma'am. This one is quite large, but I will charge you only 20,000 VND for the entire piece. Is that acceptable?" The customer nodded, pulling out a worn wallet. "All right, 20,000 VND is fair. Keep it whole for me. Do you have a string to tie it?" "Let me find a strong piece of twine for you, so it's easier to carry," Tu Tien said, searching her pockets. "Or, if you prefer, you can place it directly into your basket, or borrow this tray and return it to me next time you pass by." "No need. Just give me a smaller one to make up the weight if needed, or let's just round it out," the customer said, tossing a crisp bill onto the wooden table. "Here is 90,000 VND total. Give me a few more loofahs until it matches the amount." "Yes, yes. Thank you so much, ma'am. I truly appreciate your kindness." "Please take them carefully," Tu Tien said, bowing deeply as she handed over the heavy bundle wrapped in protective leaves. As the afternoon dragged on, the market began to thin, the intense heat yielding to a heavy, suffocating humidity. Tu Tien counted her small pile of crumpled cash. It was a minuscule fraction of what they needed, but every single note was a shield against total ruin. She packed away her remaining items and walked over to a butcher's stall at the back of the market. "Ma'am, do you have any pork fat left today?" Tu Tien asked softly, her voice barely audible over the flies buzzing around the wooden chopping blocks. The butcher looked up, wiping his bloody hands on a stained apron. "I had some left. How much do you want?" "Please give me 2 kilograms of the pure fat. I need to render it down for cooking oil. That will be 80,000 VND. Tu Tien carefully counted out the exact change from her afternoon earnings and handed it over, accepting the heavy plastic bag of white fat. She knew that rendering pork fat was far cheaper than buying bottles of processed cooking oil, a small, hidden frugality that Jack must never find out about. On her way out, she noticed a fruit stand displaying bright, sweet-smelling oranges. She hesitated, remembering how exhausted Jack's mother had looked over the past few days. "How much for the oranges, sister?" "They are 25,000 VND a kilogram, sweet and juicy, good for the health." "Can you weigh out a small bag for me? Just around 39,000 VND worth," Tu Tien requested, handing over her last remaining loose bills. She watched the scale balance, accepting the small bag of fruit like a precious treasure. This wasn't a luxury. It was a desperate attempt to bring a small sliver of comfort to a home that was rapidly filling with darkness. The small courtyard of Mother Louise's modest house was quiet, save for the rhythmic humming of cicadas in the old jackfruit tree. Mother Lishy sat on a low wooden stool, her back hunched, her trembling fingers gripping a worn black smartphone. Her eyes were red, staring blankly at the fading screen as the call disconnected. "Please listen to me," she murmured to the empty air, her voice cracking with a vulnerability she tried so desperately to hide. "Is there any way you can spare some capital right now? That land issue. The government zoning regulation is still frozen, and I can't liquidate any assets. I just need a short-term loan to clear the immediate interest. Are you sure you can't help? You just purchased new inventory? I see. I understand. Thank you anyway." She pulled the phone away, a heavy, ragged sigh tearing from her chest. Today was the 8th of the month. In exactly 1 week, the bank's final notice would expire. Her son, her brilliant, proud son Jack, had poured every single drop of his blood, sweat, and corporate fortune into a massive investment project, only for a sudden policy shift to freeze their assets and leave them completely exposed to predatory lenders. "Mama?" Mother Lishy startled, quickly wiping her eyes with the corner of her faded blouse as Tu Tien walked through the creaking wooden gate, carrying the heavy bags from the market. "Oh, Tu Tien, you're back from the market already?" Mother Louise stood up hastily, trying to smooth her disheveled hair, but the sheer physical exhaustion caused her to sway slightly. "Mama, sit down, please." "You're sweating so much," Tu Tien said, setting her bags down on the veranda and immediately rushing to her side. She took a soft cloth, gently wiping the cold sweat from the older woman's pale face. "Look at you. You're burning up. Did you take your shoulder medication today?" I'm fine, my child, just a little hot, Mother Lucci insisted, her eyes watering despite her best efforts. Did you manage to sell the loofahs and winter melons? It must have been so brutal out there in this heat. They sold out completely, Mama. The local buyers love our clean produce. Look, I even bought these fresh oranges for you. The vendors swore they were the sweetest batch of the season. Jack bought you a large bag last week, but I know how much they help with your throat. Mother Lucci looked at the oranges, her lips trembling. Jack, Darcy, that foolish boy, he still spends money on me when he has nothing left. She patted Tu Tien's hand, her voice thick with unshed tears. You work so hard, Tu Tien. Compared to your life before you met us, you shouldn't have to return to the dirt like this. It breaks my heart to see you dragging heavy baskets to the market every single day. Mama, please don't say that, Tu Tien said firmly, her eyes shining with deep, unwavering devotion. Compared to the days when I was just a homeless, wandering orphan with no place to call my own, this life is a blessing. You and Jack gave me a family. You gave me a home. Working the land is nothing compared to the warmth you've given me. As long as we are healthy and together, no amount of labor can break us. She paused, pouring a cup of cool water and handing it to the older woman. Mama, you're still agonizing over Jack's situation with the bank, aren't you? I can see it in your eyes. But you must have faith in him. Jack is incredibly resourceful. He explicitly told me that the only thing he cannot bear is seeing you fall ill from worry. I know, Tu Tien. I know he tells me everything is handled, Mother Lucci sobbed, finally letting the tears fall freely down her wrinkled cheeks. But I am his mother. I know his heart. He invested every penny of his corporate savings into that project. And now, he acts so cheerful in front of me, but I hear him tossing and turning through the walls all night long. He is drowning, and I am completely useless. Tu Tien looked down, her fingers tightening around her apron. The weight of a secret she had been keeping for 3 days suddenly became too heavy to bear. Mama, there is something you need to know. Jack didn't want me to tell you because he didn't want you to feel a single ounce of guilt. Mother Lucci looked up sharply, her breath catching. What is it? What did he do? He sold his car 3 days ago, Tu Tien whispered, her voice cracking. The luxury sedan he prized so much. He sold it to an independent dealer for cash to pay off the first wave of the bank's high-interest penalties. He leaves the house early on foot or takes the old village bus just so you won't notice the empty driveway. The older woman collapsed back onto the wooden bench, a choked cry escaping her lips as she slapped her own thigh in bitter regret. Oh God, he sold his car? And he didn't say a single word to me? Why am I so blind? Why was I so foolish to let him take on all this burden alone? I am his mother, yet I am the one dragging him into the grave with my medical bills and my helplessness. Mama, no, stop it. Tu Tien wrapped her arms tightly around the weeping woman, holding her close as the heavy silence of the rural afternoon was broken by their shared grief. Jack will never, ever blame you. He did it because he loves you more than his own status. To him, a car is just metal, but your peace of mind is irreplaceable. He's a strong man, Mama. He will rebuild. We will all rebuild together from the very ground up. Mother Lucci gripped Tu Tien's shoulders, her eyes searching the young woman's face. Promise me, Tu Tien. Promise me you will stay by his side. When a man falls from such a high place, his spirit can break completely. He won't listen to his old mother, but he listens to you. Be his anchor. Anoint his wounds when he is too proud to show his pain. I swear it, Mama, I am going nowhere, Tu Tien said softly, wiping the mother's tears with a steady, fierce resolve. Now, please rest inside where it's cool. I need to return to the farm to process this pork fat before the midday heat spoils it. And don't worry about Jack. He went up to the high grapefruit orchard this morning to clear his head. He will be home for dinner soon. Miles away, on the sloping ridges of a sun-drenched mountain plantation, the air was crisp, smelling heavily of crushed citrus leaves and dry pine needles. Jack stood beneath the sprawling canopy of an ancient grapefruit tree. his expensive leather shoes coated in a thick layer of red clay dust. He had discarded his tailored suit jacket long ago. His white button-down shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, damp with sweat. He stared up at the tangled branches above him, his mind a chaotic battlefield of numbers, legal clauses, and bank deadlines. If these secondary branches aren't pruned soon, they will choke out the main trunk. A deep, resonant voice called out from the shadows of the orchard. Jack turned around, startled, as a man clad in rugged farming clothes and a wide-brimmed straw hat walked out from between the rows of trees. The man stopped, his eyes widening in recognition as he took in Jack's disheveled but distinctly urban appearance. "Jack? Is that really you?" the man asked, pulling off his hat to reveal a weathered, smiling face. "Duyen?" Jack gasped, a sudden rush of warmth breaking through his icy anxiety. "What on earth are you doing up here on the ridges? I could ask you the same thing, my friend." Tu Tien laughed heartily, stepping forward to clasp Jack's hand in a firm, powerful grip. "Last I heard, you were running a multi-million-dollar corporate enterprise in the city center. What is a high-flying CEO doing standing in the middle of a muddy grapefruit orchard, looking like he's trying to fight a tree?" Jack offered a wry, self-deprecating smile, looking down at his ruined shoes. "Let's just say the corporate tower turned out to be a very volatile place to stand, Tuan. The marketplace. It's a brutal battlefield right now. One day you're expanding your portfolio, and the next, a single regulatory shift freezes your entire life's work." He sighed, looking around the pristine, meticulously kept rows of citrus trees. "I heard a rumor after graduation that you walked away from the city engineering offers to return to the soil, but I never realized your operation was this massive." "It's an honest living, Jack," Tuan said softly, his jovial tone shifting into something deeply grounded and observant. He could see the deep, dark circles under his old classmate's eyes, the tense rigidity in his shoulders that no amount of forced casualness could hide. "Come, let's get a drink at the small roadside stall down the path. You look like a man who has been carrying the weight of the world on his back without taking a single breath." They walked down to a small, thatched roof hut overlooking the valley, where an old vendor handed them 2 icy cans of herbal ginseng tea. Jack cracked the tab, the cold liquid shocking his parched throat as he leaned against the rough wooden railing, staring out over the vast green horizon. "Tun. I won't lie to you," Jack said, his voice dropping into a quiet, raw confession. "I'm facing a catastrophic financial bottleneck. I've had to liquidate personal assets, sell my vehicles, and restructure everything just to protect my mother from the bank's aggression. I came up to these hills because my family owns a small, neglected plot of grapefruit trees nearby, and I was honestly wondering, is it possible to pivot? Can a man who only knows how to trade numbers learn how to survive on the land?" Tu Tien took a slow sip of his tea, looking out over the hectares of thriving vegetation. "Agriculture isn't a fallback plan, Jack. It's a relationship with the earth. But to answer your question, yes, absolutely. If you have the discipline to learn from the roots up, the dirt is far more reliable than any volatile stock market." He stood up, motioning for Jack to follow him back into the rows. "Come here. Let me show you what it actually takes. Since you're here, let's turn that corporate brain of yours into something practical." They walked down to a section of younger trees, their leaves a vibrant, glossy green. "You see this tree right here?" Aitan pointed to a sturdy trunk. "This is a premium green-skinned grapefruit tree. It's been in the ground for about 8 years. If you manage the nutrients correctly, a single tree like this can start yielding consistent commercial fruit from its 3rd year onward. Right now, in the current market, high-quality organic citrus is commanding the highest price point across the country because consumers are terrified of chemical shortcuts. But look at these small shoots clustering around the base," Jack noted, his sharp analytical mind instinctively tracking the patterns. "They seem to be draining the primary branches." "Exactly!" Tu Tien smiled, clacking his pruning shears together. you haven't lost your edge. If you don't aggressively cut away these useless sucker branches, they will steal the vital nutrients from the main trunk. When the fruit sets, you'll end up with hundreds of tiny, stunted grapefruits that hold zero commercial value instead of the massive, premium yield that brings in the real revenue. In farming, just like in business, you have to be willing to cut away the dead weight to let the core project thrive. They move deeper into a covered greenhouse area where strange, multi-fingered yellow fruits hung from low-hanging branches like golden hands. "This is my Buddha's hand citrus project," Tu Tien explained, gently cradling a uniquely shaped fruit. "We harvest these all year round. The perfectly shaped, symmetrical ones are sold at a massive premium for the Lunar New Year altars, sometimes fetching 200,000 to 300,000 VND for a single piece. The imperfect ones, we don't throw them away. We slice and dry them for pharmaceutical companies to use as raw medicinal materials. Nothing goes to waste." The scale of this. "The labor must be intense," Jack murmured, genuine admiration replacing his initial despair. "How do you handle the pollination cycle for an entire valley without relying on chemical stabilizers?" "We do it by hand, Jack." "Old-fashioned, meticulous human labor," Tu Tien said, pointing to a group of local workers carrying small, soft, cosmetic brushes. "The blossoms are hermaphroditic, so we manually transfer the pollen from one flower to another using these brushes to guarantee a near 100% success rate. For an orchard of this size, I hired 25 to 30 workers during peak season. It's a massive logistical operation, but the financial returns speak for themselves. Look over there, that ridge contains over 1,000 custard apple trees. Last year alone, after deducting all overhead, labor, and fertilizer costs, that single hillside cleared over 2 billion VND in pure profit." Jack stared at the thriving orchard, the heavy, suffocating knot in his chest slowly beginning to unravel. For weeks, he had viewed his corporate failure as the definitive end of his life, a shameful descent into darkness. But looking at Tu Tien, a man who sweated in the dirt yet commanded a kingdom of sustainable wealth, he realized that starting over wasn't a degradation, it was an evolution. "Tu Tien, I need to learn this," Jack said, his voice steadying with a newfound, fierce determination. "I have the land, I have the raw energy, and I have a family that I refuse to let fall into poverty. If I come down here, if I put on the clothes and commit to the dirt, will you teach me the true technical mechanics of this trade?" Tu Tien turned, looking into Jack's eyes, recognizing the fiery, unbreakable spirit that had made him a legend in their university days. He slapped Jack heavily on the shoulder, a wide, genuine grin breaking across his face. "I've been waiting for you to say that, my friend. The corporate world might have chewed you up, but the earth doesn't care about your titles. It only cares about your sweat. Come down next week, live on the plantation for a few days, and I will personally walk you through every single operational procedure until you're ready to transform your family's land into an empire." The sky had turned into a soft, bruised purple by the time Jack finally walked back through the old wooden gate of his home. His legs were aching from the long miles, his hands were rough and calloused from handling the soil samples Tu Tien had given him, but for the first time in months, the crushing weight on his chest was gone. From the kitchen, the rich, savory aroma of rendered pork fat and fresh vegetable soup drifted out into the courtyard, blending with the scent of the sweet oranges resting on the veranda table. He looked up to see Tu Tien standing in the doorway, her hair pinned back, her apron dusted with flour, holding a flickering oil lamp to guide his way. There were no grand speeches, no tearful laments about the luxury lifestyle that had slipped through their fingers. In her steady, loving gaze, Jack saw the truth of what mattered. The corporate towers could fall, the bank accounts could empty, and the world could turn its back on them. But as long as they had the strength to work the earth and the love to protect one another, they were completely invincible. They were finally home, rooted in the dirt, ready to grow again.